So last week, we were talking about the joys of the application form being the start of the learner journey. And we were talking about how it's the beginning of this kind of 3 phases of signing learners into training. So it's not really a surprise that this week, with the fabulous Emma and Suze, we are talking about initial assessment.
Yes. Yes, we are.
Yes, we are. So initial assessment is the bit that sits between application form and sign up. For a lot of providers, quite honestly, they're really shit at this, aren't they?
Yeah, and that's just dull, right? So they don't. I mean, I'm not going to lie. Everybody thinks a great initial assessment is going through the standard and asking learners and employers to grade themselves out of all of the different criteria in the standard, and that's it. And their basics and their functional skills. So, and that is the initial assessment. That's all they do. They don't have any concept about how, number one, dull that is. And I get that there is a place for capturing some of that evidence at some point, but don't talk these people out of working with you before you actually even get them signed into learning. And at no point during that process, for the vast majority of providers out there at the moment, do they ask any of the questions around learning support. And the strategies around what does that look like? How do we talk people into telling us what it is that they think they're going to need to be successful in achieving their standards? It's dull. It's dull, and it doesn't.
I'm personally not sure that you had any opinion about that at all. I think there's a fence post that you sat on there, love.
Emma's disappeared. I
keep talking between ourselves.
Sure, I am very, very sure on this that one of the reasons why retention and achievement rates are at an historic low in the apprenticeship landscape is because those questions aren't asked at initial assessment to be able to plan individualized learning well.
But
you go first. You go.
But it's not enough to ask the questions. You've got to do something with the information. So there is a certain extent of over-delegating responsibility for deciding whether or not a learner should come into training. So people who are senior in the organization, who know what great looks like, who know the consequences of accepting or not accepting a learner, are potentially not involved enough. So you can't just be asking the questions and then going la 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 la, tick box, we've asked the questions, job done. For the learner, in terms of accessing great individualized support, we've got to be actually analyzing that information and working out what that means, and making sure from a delivery perspective that the information gathered at initial assessment and sign up an application form actually then makes it to the tutor.
Yeah, no, but also I think that, and this is something that I think Emma's very good at, it's about how do you change mindset with employers, and with employers as in with providers. How do you change mindset around why they should care about that additional support stuff being assessed well and then managed well, right? Because right now, I mean, Emma, you see this all the time. You talk to businesses, and yes, it sounds really, really great, but the emphasis is on the income and on the bums on seats and making sure the starts come in. They don't want to talk themselves into making different decisions for learners, because that's not the right and appropriate learning program for them. They want the initial assessment to tick those basic boxes to convince them to take that learner into learning. Right?
No, I don't just work with training providers. I believe this across the board. If you invest in your people and you look after your people, they're going to stay. Lower turnover, they feel more fulfilled, they're much more likely to achieve higher, they'll stay on the program, tick, tick, tick. They'll work harder. There's studies out there that show that people will work harder if you invest in them. And it's the same for your learners. If you find out from the start they need support, which this initial assessment is actually the next big key thing for us at the Better Health Generation, because we have a tool that we, a company we work with, Spencer, and we work with them and we put in this tool at the assessment stage, and it defines whether somebody needs the extra support or not. And that's when we come in and we then match the learner up with the correct clinician and the correct support. And I think it's really key to get that in right at the beginning. It's absolutely imperative for that whole learner's their whole learner experience. But so alongside the assessment, you look at the education, you look at their level of handwriting, you look at their emotional status. Are they neurodiverse? They may not know they're neurodiverse, but we might see signs of this within this assessment. Because the system, for whatever reason, has let them down. They're not, they've not fit into the school system. And actually, these assessments that the training providers do should highlight this along with our tool to make sure they then get that holistic approach to their whole training program. So
a key thing is making sure that initial assessment happens prior to taking the learner into training.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because before you take the learner into training, you can make decisions around whether this is the right learner for you, which we talked about last time, whether this is the right program. So first of all, is this the learner that we want to take into training? Second of all, is this the right level? Is it the right qualification? Is it the right subject? Is it the right funding stream to meet this learner's needs? Because there's so much that's available these days. It's not a case that apprenticeship is the only way of funding a learner to do things. Suze.
I was going to say, but also, as well as that decision making from leaders around what is the right program for that learner based on the initial assessment, the amount of learners who get absolutely, what's the word? Blown away by the sign-up process, right? Because apart from anything else, there's so many flipping forms to fill in because it's government funding and bureaucracy. And if you've got a learning support need, actually, it's daunting doing some of this stuff. So if you've already got your initial assessment, Spencer is a great diagnostic tool around those learning support needs. If you've got that, then you're also being able to do an individualized learner sign-up. Because we know how many learners disappear after sign up, right? Yeah. Not so much on apprenticeships because they tend to be employed and it's through the employer, but on other programs, learners think it's a great idea. They want to go, they want to get involved, they want to be part of this learner journey, develop their skills, go to a sign up or go online to do a sign up that doesn't fit their needs.
It's just sausage factory in a lot of cases.
Yeah, it is. It's like, we need the bums on seats, we need the bums on seats, sign here, sign here, sign here, sign here. It's not individualized, it's not personalized, it's not taking into account their learning support needs. And then they don't show up to the first day of learning having talked themselves out of it because everything else was either very dull or very daunting up to that point.
And if you've got somebody who struggles with maths and English potentially, and anxiety, and the idea of filling in a form is just so overwhelming, and especially the vast amount in which they are, that could just be the biggest barrier and hurdle, and they just can't get over it. And I think it's a real shame. I'm going to slightly be controversial in the respect to Julia.
Yes, please.
I understand you want to get the right fit and the right people. I totally agree with that. What I don't want is for people to be discriminated against because they have barriers and needs. And I think there's a really fine line there because there are people.
Barriers and needs aren't the same as whether or not somebody is right for the program and the funding.
But that is defined on somebody's individual opinion, and that's the bit that worries me. There's nothing defined in place.
Fundamentally, for an apprenticeship, you are training somebody and qualifying them to do the job. So your first and priority for initial assessment is that job fit.
Yeah.
If I'm doing the job, and I've always said within apprenticeships, you want a third, a third, a third. So as a learner, a third of the content within that apprenticeship should be easy peasy, lemon squeezy. I do it already. I don't have to think about it. I'm there.
Right.
A third of it should be, I'm pretty much there, but I'm not really following best practice in my job. And so we're teaching you how to evidence it, do best practice. We're nudging you up a bit. And a third of it should be brand new and scare me a little bit. That's where the stretch and challenge is. We talked last time how a lot of providers are under challenging because they're over excluding. And that would not fit in with that final third. There's nothing in there that's stretching, challenging, exciting me. It's all blah, blah. I'm already there. That's not a great fit. But at the same time, it's very easy for providers, and there's often big push from employers. And we saw this particularly within childcare, of employers needing people to be on a level 3 to fit in with ratio. And they would be pushing learners, and you would have to be really tough on that to say, they are not there yet. Because all that happens is you lose the first 6 months with a rabbit in the headlights because it's over their head. But so you've got to get it right, because otherwise it's not fair on the learner.
Also, Emma has a point, though. There is a fine line, and that's where it's about having a really strong learner support strategy, where the business has said, these are the benchmarks that we will use. These are the decisions that you will be measured against, right? Because it goes one way or the other. You're going to get sales teams out there that will literally sign up learners that are doing a level 3 with entry 2 literacy.
They need to be fantastic onboarding. There needs to be the onboarding process for training providers needs to be absolutely hot. It needs to be fine-tuned. They need to be the right people, the right tone, the right approach. Then
but it also needs to be supervised, and this is where initial assessment fits in. Too often, you look at things like BKSB. Other systems are available. So you look at functional skills initial assessment. It is a contractual requirement that every apprentice completes a functional skills initial assessment as part of sign up. The number of times that is not done prior to sign up. The only time you've got any negotiating power over a learner is prior to sign up, when you can say, we're not going to sign you until you do this blankety blank test. Because the learners who have the biggest issues around functional skills, both in terms of mindset as well as ability, and the mindset is the bigger barrier, they are going to scumbag you. They're not going to do it. They're not going to do it. And if you sign somebody who hasn't done their initial assessment, they're not going to behave any better once they're into training. And you have created a problem for yourself in apprenticeship.
Isn't that interesting, though? Because now these days, I would say if a learner is not accessing the initial assessment tools that they need to do prior to sign up, I would be then referring them on to someone like the Better Health Generation to have those discussions about barrier busting, about what those fears are. So, for some learners, it's just like they can't be bothered. They've got too much on. They're not interested, really. The employer's making them do it, and they're never going to stay in learning. But for a lot of learners, now, looking at this new, technology, there are learners out there that will talk themselves out of doing it for fear of failing because they've historically failed.
But you still need to have that conversation prior to sign up.
No, absolutely.
Because as soon as you have taken that learner into training,
absolutely.
There is a place for us at every point within the sign up program.
That's my point. That's my point. Yeah, that idea of Better Health Generation being able to pick up with those learners that have stalled, because there will be a barrier to why they stalled. And then if a good learner support strategy across all of those, that initial start phase is going to lead to better starts and more starts in your business.
But that's when I think the businesses should be bringing people in like ourselves, because it's all well and good having an EAP system, but a lot of people don't access it. A lot of the time it's an app. I was speaking to a company yesterday. They've got over 1,000 people. They don't access their EAP. Half of them don't even know what it is or where it, what it does. Whereas when we support businesses, we actually have that contact with the employees to make sure they know who we are, what we do, and I think that's really key. But I think these businesses that are specifically focusing on apprenticeships, that are wanting their employees to go through the apprenticeship program, should almost be introduced to us if they've got barriers. If there's situations where those learners are going, actually, I'm not really sure I want to do this, bring us in, let us have a chat with them, find out where the barriers are, and then work towards going towards that apprenticeship.
Which
Investing
can be a great way of hitting your bums on seats.
Yeah.
We've got to invest maybe
out, and this is our thing.
Maybe a delayed start sometimes.
Yeah. A delayed start is better than no start.
No start. That's exactly what I say. Great minds. Great minds. I was about to say the same thing. So yeah.
It goes back to that investing in your people.
Yeah.
Right from the start.
But it also goes back to having the systems, processes, and data systems in place and the supervisory systems in place to be spotting learners who are getting snagged at every stage of the learner journey. Absolutely, but particularly between application and sign up. There is a sweet spot in terms of the time. 2 days is probably not the sweet spot because that's too quick.
Yeah.
That's not saying at the end of the month when you're desperate to hit your target that we don't pull out all the stops and we do it in 2 days. And there'll be learners where that's appropriate and we haven't scared them. But at the same time, if it's more than a month or 2 months, then we really want to be intervening and having those conversations as to why has that not happened. And for a lot of learners, providers are perfectly capable of having those initial conversations themselves in-house and then potentially referring learners where we're going, we need extra firepower with this.
I think the big barrier with the training providers is they look at it as a cost, they see it as an inconvenience, but actually what they've got to do is look at the bigger picture and understand that if they invest and do it right from the beginning and get that process, fine-tuned, then they won't lose as many learners. They'll be able to onboard more people, and their numbers will naturally go up. Then their income goes up, and everybody's happy. The learners are happy. It just makes sense.
And it links to attention and achievement. And at the end of the day, when you look at as an ops director by trade, all my working life, my big thing has always been, what is the return on investment in terms of making choices about spending money in the business? How does this make money? How does this save money? How does this increase productivity and efficiency, etc., etc., etc.? That's always been, and Julia can attest to this.
And getting this right, tick, tick, tick. All of them.
Are you making money? Are you saving me money? And then I'm not interested. But this does both, because if you do it well and actually with commitment from
that's the key thing, though, isn't it? Doing it well.
In the business, if you commit to doing this, and I'm passionate about learner support, I really am. I'm not going to start. Sorry, because if I start, we'll be here now. And we all have other things to do as well today. But I'm passionate about this. If you're committed to doing it and doing it really, really well, you will see your starts increase. You will see your retention. You'll see your achievement. You will see your employer engagement, your employer communications, your reputation build and grow. And good brand reputation leads to better business and business growth and opportunity. We all know this. So, but if you do it well, then that where they want everyone to have 50% achievement rates this year, they'll be leaving them in the dust, because you will automatically see those improvements. But you need to do it well, and you need to engage with good partners around it as well, because it's not just one size fits all. Let's tick that box. It's got to be very individualized.
Speaking up for the delivery, speaking up for the delivery staff who don't have the same viewpoint, one of the key things that teaching staff justifiably bitch and moan about is when they feel that they've been inflicted with a learner that should never been allowed onto program.
Oh yeah.
Initial assessment is a key way of shutting down that, on one hand, legitimate moan, on the other hand, an accountability weasel.
But if they've got the right health and wellbeing support in place, so that should take the pressure off those tutors.
I'm saying it's it can be, for some staff, an accountability weasel on you should never have signed that learner in the first place. I'm not rubbish. I haven't done anything wrong. My failure to get a tune out of that learner is your fault.
But also, and I know this is
a great initial assessment shuts down all of that and therefore makes it a lot easier to deliver improved learner outcomes.
Also, and I know I'm jumping ahead a few agreed discussions here, but also what that does do is that if that initial support is put in place with trusted partners, at the initial assessment support, and then the ongoing support is with trusted partners, then I'm going to guess, if we do some data studies around this over the next couple of years, Emma, that
and that's the plan.
Staff well-being, staff retention, and decreases staff turnover, because they are having their well-being also managed by some of those.
Well, they're not taking on the trauma, are they? They're not taking on the initial trauma response of dealing with people who have got difficult home lives, struggling to balance work, apprenticeship, and life, because life is hard at the minute, you know, cost of living, you name it, you know. So I think if you've got a health and wellbeing support in place, then that takes that pressure off the tutor. Your tutors are more likely to stay in business. They're going to be happier. Their output's going to be higher, and the quality of their work is going to be higher because they're happier within the role. So again, another win-win-win. So as you know, as far as we're concerned, and actually we are working with a training provider at the minute, piloting that and trying to understand what the stats are, to understand if their turnover of staff lessens by implementing us and Spencer together, because at the end of the day, that's what people want to know. They want to know the impact, and we're all about measuring the impact, which is actually what we do day to day when we're working with these learners. Is we do an initial assessment, then 8 weeks later we do another assessment so we can measure that distance travel, because it's imperative for auditing, and we all know that that is probably most training providers' biggest fear, is that auditing process. And that's why if you get it right from the beginning with the onboarding and the assessment, then you're doing it right from the start, and you can show that, and you know, you can
go down that additional funding with confidence,
absolutely,
without risk, without financial risk, and that is the big thing, isn't it? It's about
because you've got all of that information that you need to show that it's making the impact. Even if it's a side step, it's better than people going backwards. We just, you know, keep edging people forwards, whether they, you know, improve slightly or by huge amounts, it doesn't matter. The main thing is people are going in the right direction.
Yeah, absolutely.
And one of the key things that creates job satisfaction within teaching and assessment staff is when they get a difficult learner through. That's when you get that damn I'm good moment.
And really
you get
is,
that
right?
as a provider as well. When you're looking at those learners that have finally achieved, you've worked really hard for them, and you sit there and go, nobody else could have done that. Yeah, we rock. From a commercial perspective, as wonderful as those learners are, and I used to get so much joy out of those learners, you can't afford to have too many of them.
No.
Because they are such hard work. And that again comes back down to initial assessment. Same as you can't be under challenging because learners just drop out because they're bored. You have to be in that sweet spot. For me, learning difficulties and difficult home lives are not a reason to exclude a learner from training.
Somebody who's motivated, Julia, that can be due to anxiety and mental health. So that you have to have the right people on board that understand those barriers, because you can just put a barrier in front of somebody who's already got their own barriers that are, you know, actually with the right support from us would potentially be one of your highest achievers.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's really tricky. It's really tricky.
But it's fundamentally understanding what are the real reasons not to take a learner into training, and that's the strategic work and the high level conversation that has to happen before you make any changes. What are the real things that stop achievement that we should be actively looking that make someone not an ideal learner? You know, what does an ideal learner look like? And it will be different for every provider, and we want to be as inclusive as possible within that. And yeah, that's what we should be focusing on with application form, with initial assessment and sign up, is you're effectively identifying, does this learner fit into our sense of yep, we can do a great job with this person. And there's a load of stuff that we need to gather information on
Yeah, it's huge.
in
It's a
order to
huge piece.
support the learner effectively, but are not reasons to say no to the learner.
You
And
know,
providers need to understand what are the real things that they need to be saying no to.
no, and I see a swim lane in my head, right? In terms of all of the different actors in this process and how all of the different ways, different interventions can help and support. And when something doesn't work, what's the next move in that? Almost like a chess game, isn't it? It's like, and you've got the learner as an actor, you've got senior management as an actor, better health, us, tutors, ops managers, claims teams, all of them sit within this swim lane around what that learning support strategy and good effective learning support strategy looks like to get the right result for the learner. Because at the end of the day, the learner sits at the heart of everything we do. And
yep.
if they don't, we're not doing our jobs properly, right?
Yep.
So that idea of, it is about inclusion, not exclusion, but it's also about a stretch and challenge, but it's not setting learners up to fail. It's all of those different things about what does that support look like and referrals look like if somebody needs to have some intensive support prior to being able to access a successful learner journey because of the varying barriers that they're facing. What does that referral to the Better Health Generation, as example, look like, or a local mental health charity, or whatever that happens to look like for that individual? You all need a swim lane, people.
Yeah, and it's not going to happen overnight. And I think people need to understand that it's not going to happen overnight. It's baby steps. It's working together as a team. All of those key people that have contact or are responsible for those learners, all of them working together for the same goal and outcomes.
Absolutely.
On the other hand,
support.
It can happen overnight if you want it to. It is not that hard for the senior management team to sit down and define what does our ideal learner look like? What are we comfortable with? And it will be different for different programs. What are our minimum requirements? When is somebody going to be under challenged by this program? We want these people in the middle. And the more of those people in the middle we can get, the easier we are making our lives and the better able we are making it to be able to support learners that fit within that. And that's a good thing. Because when we're all working under enormous stress, because we have too many of the wrong kind of learners, that does not lead to a happy provider and it does not lead to great success. And that ultimately means we don't make any money.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say the wrong kind of learner. I would say learners that have been signed onto the wrong provision for them. Thank you very much. Just saying.
That seems like a great way to go. If any of this content has resonated with you today and you've made it to the end of this, we would love to hear from you and our contact details will be in the post. Thank you very much.